Ask anyone in 2017 what the greatest TV shows of all time are, and chances are pretty good they'll mention Game of Thrones. Ask again in 2025, and if they remember Thrones, it always comes with a yeah but. Yeah, Game of Thrones was amazing, but the last season ruins it. A season that was so awful, it excised one of the biggest IPs in pop culture history into an afterthought. Of course, I'm coming from the perspective as a fan of the books Game of Thrones was adapting, so the show went off the rails for me much sooner than Season 8. But even I can't help getting goosebumps when Light of the Seven starts playing, or when Jon Snow stares down the Night King at Harbhowm. So in this video, I'm searching for the last truly amazing episode of Game of Thrones, from both an adaptational viewpoint and from the viewpoint of someone who just likes good TV. This video is brought to you by my patrons, who have already been watching this for several days now. If you enjoy my channel and want to support me, please consider joining at patreon.com/crusaderchris. Thank you. For this exercise, let's work our way back from the end. The finale, the bells, the last of the Starks, and the long night are all too painfully awful to warrant much discussion. The finale does have this absolutely metal shot of Daenerys and Drogon, which would hit a lot harder if she wasn't about to hold a Nazi rally. Last of the Starks had this terrible scene with Bronn waltzing into Winterfell and becoming Lord of Highgarden. The Long Night was shite because we had 7 seasons of build-up for a villain who was defeated after one battle and a sneak attack. But Episode 2, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. No, not that one, this one. Lots of folks make an exception for this episode. It's the calm before the storm. It's Sandor and Arya having a nice little moment. It's Arya having sex with Gendry. And it's Podrick singing Jenny of Oldstones. The truth is, there isn't a lot of plot for the writers to mess up here. It's just a bunch of interactions between our favorite characters who haven't shared a scene together in a really long time. Of course we're going to like it, but that doesn't mean it's actually good. When I think about this episode, I remember that short little nothing of a conversation between Jaime Lannister and Bran Stark in the Godswood. Here's the reunion of the incident that sparked an entire war, and all we get is Jaime apologizing, saying he isn't that person anymore.
I'm not that person anymore.
The kind that would murder a child, I guess, even though here he is threatening to put Edmure's baby into a trebuchet.
I'll send for your baby boy, and I'll launch him into Riverrun with a catapult.
And Bran saying he's not Brandon Stark anymore. He's something else now.
I'm something else now.
But I ask you, what purpose does this conversation serve when it turns out both of them are lying? Jaime is the same person. He doesn't complete his arc, because he goes back to King's Landing to be with Cersei. And Bran is Brandon Stark, when it suits him at least, because he goes to King's Landing and accepts the nomination to be King of Westeros, minus the North for no reason. This man is the king of a nation that doesn't even include where he's from anymore. If Bran was the Three-Eyed Raven more so than Brandon Stark, sort of like how the Three-Eyed Raven was more so the Three-Eyed Raven than Brynden Rivers, why would he accept the crown? Really, this episode is only remembered fondly because it's the least offensively stupid because it's not actually trying to accomplish anything plot-wise. And when it does try to do an interesting conversation, it's absolutely worthless. The search continues. Most of Season 7 is insultingly dumb. From the nonsensically peaceful gathering at the Dragon Pit, and the constant beating us over the head that Jon is just like Ned, guys, wow, such honorable, to the harebrained scheme to capture a white that only worked out thanks to Jon's Valyrian steel plot armor and Gendry's inhuman sprint speed. And don't forget, this is where we get our shoehorned Arya versus Sansa subplot, because they didn't get along when they were younger, and that's the only groundwork we have for their relationship. So yes, obviously, they must not get along even now that they've each suffered horrific abuses and trauma separately and are finally reunited in their home. The Arya-Sansa business is really a microcosm of the larger issue with late-stage Game of Thrones.
I think it's a microcosm of more serious things, but, you know.
The writers diverge so heavily not just from what George did write for books 4 and 5, but the writers also didn't bother to explore where George is going to be taking these characters and plotlines. Obviously, The Winds of Winter isn't done yet,
I'm still working on the book. That's the question you all want to ask. Don't fucking ask it.
so we don't know for a fact what'll happen between Jaime, Brienne, and Lady Stoneheart, a confrontation George sets up in Book 5. So instead of using creativity and brainpower, or their literal private access to the man himself, the writers just deleted Lady Stoneheart entirely, and now they're left with a gaping hole of wasted juicy drama that could apply to 3 different characters. Same situation with Arya and Sansa. The real plot between Sansa and Littlefinger is still in the Vale, and Arya is still in Braavos. D&D needed a way to get Sansa in Winterfell as soon as possible to link up with Jon, because they weren't interested in the Vale storyline, a storyline that will actually see Sansa grow as a person and a politician as she navigates figures like Miranda Royce, Harry Harding, and the Mad Mouse. Instead, they heap another physical and sexual abuse plotline on her by merging Sansa with Jane Poole, arranging her to be near Jon when he's resurrected, and they can take Winterfell together. It's exciting to watch, but it's just surface level writing. Sansa's character development stalled out around season 4 or 5. And no, suffering more sexual trauma at the hands of Ramsay is not character development. Do you really want your message to be that Sansa is better off and safely at home now because of men like Joffrey and Ramsay and Littlefinger?
Without Littlefinger and Ramsay and the rest, I would have stayed a little bird all my life.
Yucky. Arya's plotline is tougher to predict even than Sansa's, so again, D&D didn't really even try. They give her one final crucible in Braavos with the waif, she leaves the House of Black and White epically, and then doesn't really do anything of substance for the entire show until she kills the Night King. Nymeria and her wolf pack roaming around the Riverlands? Useless, since superhero Jon and Deus Ex Knights of the Vale already beat Ramsay, and Sansa uses Ramsay's hounds as the method of his execution. George has said the Stark direwolves, i.e. probably Nymeria, will face off against Ramsay's hounds. And because 2 women, even sisters, can't just have a simple and wholesome relationship in Game of Thrones, one where they aren't constantly trying to one-up each other, D&D thought this would be a good time to end Littlefinger's arc. He plants the same stupid letter that Cersei made Sansa write Robb in season 1. The one that anyone with half a brain cell could realize Sansa wrote under extreme duress and the threat of harm coming to her and her father. Arya finds the letter, is too stupid to see any of that, threatens Sansa with a dagger and her bag of faces, and then purely for shock value, Arya does see Littlefinger's manipulation finally and cuts his throat. Again, exciting TV, but poorly written. And I'm left wondering if things could have been better had the writers just tried to follow the plot threads George set up in Book 5. And the rest of Season 7 is just bland. Nothing much to say. Certainly nothing I'd call a great episode of TV. The closest would be The Spoils of War, only since I appreciate the filmmaking aspect of shooting a huge battle sequence like this. We get some great shots of Drogon, this funny scorpion moment with Bronn, and that's about it. Oh, and Jaime's mad dash at the end sort of ruins it for me. Not only is this not even close to where Jaime should be in his character arc, I mean, he's literally trying to slay a dragon for the sanctity of Queen Cersei's reign. Whereas in the books, Jaime just ripped up Cersei's plea to come save her from the sparrows. It's just silly that he plunges in full plate armor into a lake, and Bronn just pulls him away to safety. Cheap shock value type stuff. Fitting for late-stage Thrones and other popcorn flicks, but the show used to respect our intelligence just a teensy bit more. You want me to say it, don't you? I should stop here and give D&D their flowers. Season 6, Episode 10, The Winds of Winter.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth!
I'm going to.
But I'm not gonna. It's a good episode. Good TV. Not great though. Episode 10 is the culmination of King's Landing's Tommen and Cersei plot. They aged Tommen way up for the show, so he's basically making all his own kingly decisions. His basic ethos is that he wants to be a more gentle and pious king than Joffrey was, but this comes with the complete absence of a spine. Lena Headey is still the main star of this plotline, so Cersei can't fail. She has to win. That's what I find cheap about the wildfire explosion at the Great Sept. It wasn't really a smart political maneuver or a surprise twist in the show's wider plotline. It lacked consequence because the writers gave themselves no other options to take the King's Landing plotline. Mainly, this is because they omitted Aegon Targaryen. By the end of Book 5, and based on the preview chapters for Winds, Aegon and the Golden Company have already taken Storm's End, and appear poised to wrest King's Landing from the doomed and politically weak Cersei and Tommen. We don't know how that plotline will go. There is a chance, I suppose, that Mace Tyrell simply crushes Aegon and Jon Connington in battle, and that's that. But it seems pretty clear George is putting a lot of emphasis on Aegon for this middle section of A Song of Ice and Fire's plotline. What I mean by middle section is that Westeros needs a conflict in between the War of the Five Kings, which basically ended with the Red Wedding, but before Daenerys comes west and the Long Night begins. This is why George spent so much of books 4 and 5 setting up characters like Euron Greyjoy, Arianne Martell, and Aegon and Jon-Con. They will take center stage in the plotline of Southern Westeros, not Cersei. So D&D could have just asked George what his plans were, or they should have at least been more creative in what storylines they invented for this middle section of the show.
And you know,
At the end of this episode, Cersei gets crowned queen for Seven's sake, the literal ruling queen, the first one in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. It's a complete and total perversion of the source material Thrones was adapting.
We're making this shit up.
But even if we look at this decision within the scope of the show itself, it's just lazy. It handwaves all the world building they did in the prior seasons about power resides where men believe it resides.
Power resides where men believe it resides. It's a trick, a shadow on the wall.
That great quote that George came up with and became a central theme the audience connects Game of Thrones with. Which lords put power into Cersei's hands? How are all of these folks not rebelling instantly? What power does Cersei have individually other than the biggest bodyguard in history? She has no martial strength, no blood claim to the throne, and no skill in diplomacy that could explain the realm loving her. She seizes the throne because she's there and she can, and nobody tries to stop her until Daenerys arrives. This is also a symptom of the butchery of Euron Greyjoy. In the books, Euron wants to ascend as high up as he can go. He probably wants to be a god, but he'd certainly settle for king. But in the show, he's submissive to Cersei despite having the Iron Fleet, and is really only interested in killing his niece and nephew and inserting his finger into Cersei's bum.
A finger in the bum.
Why isn't Euron fighting her? Why blow up Mace Tyrell and disregard his political ambition? There's no Edric Storm, no Maya Stone, no faction that rallies around one of Robert's offspring, or a Southern Loyalist faction to Stannis. Nope, the Game of Thrones is super easy now. All you have to do is call dibs. Did Stannis try that? Did he ever say dibs? And the Jon Targaryen reveal is exciting and all, but it kind of turns my grape sour when I realize D&D clearly only cared about adapting a certain few iconic moments that would be sure to make television history.
It was a big holy shit for me.
Ned Stark's execution, the betrayal of the Red Wedding.
Everyone is at risk. That's what we loved about the books, and that's what we're trying to recreate with the series.
The truth about Jon's mysterious parentage. Beyond this reveal, as nicely done as it is, the writers failed to go anywhere interesting with it, so that makes me retroactively hate the scene. It never ended up mattering that Jon was Rhaegar's son, aside from inventing some ham-fisted conflict between himself and Dany, which could be used as an excuse for Dany's rapid decline into madness. If you hated what they did to Dany's character in Season 8, it started here with this scene that D&D had no idea where to take beyond this singular viral moment. I don't see any greatness in any of the 9 previous episodes comprising Season 6 either. I respect the Battle of the Bastards for the same reason I respect the Spoils of War, but the logic surrounding the battle is so dumb I can't ignore it. This must have been another one of those moments where D&D foresaw an epic viral moment with the sudden rescue by the Knights of the Vale. Yeah, it was awesome, but if we compare to another epic rescue from earlier, Tywin and Loras at the Blackwater, we see how shallow it really is. We're supposed to accept that Sansa would keep the Knights of the Vale a secret from Jon. Why? Because she knows Jon wouldn't like Littlefinger's involvement? That Jon would say no to all these extra soldiers because he doesn't trust Baelish? Even Sophie Turner has no idea why Sansa didn't tell Jon.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Why do you too? Sansa didn't tell Jon because she wanted all the credit, and it was a more dramatic moment when she showed up, and it makes for really good television.
So it's clear the writers didn't really care, and I should probably care way less than I do, but whatever, I'm weird. I'm not even suggesting Jon would have changed his battle plan had he known about the Vale. It was a good idea to draw out Ramsay's host, wait until they encircled him with a shield wall, and then unleash the Valemen to break the wall. Something like Henry V's secret army hidden in the forest during the Battle of Agincourt. Again, it's not the scene itself I'm shadowboxing, but the logic behind it. Episode 8 has this, so I think we can just move on. Episode 7, however, is so awful, it makes me want to Kermit sewer slide all over the place. The Broken Man. Pretty bold to evoke the name of arguably the most famous monologue from A Song of Ice and Fire and give it to this Brother Ray character, a knockoff Septon Maribald, and then completely butcher the entire point. In Book 4, Brienne meets Septon Maribald, an illiterate man of the faith who roams the Riverlands. As a boy no older than Podrick, Maribald and his brothers were conscripted into the War of the Ninepenny Kings. Willem died upon the Stepstones and never struck a blow. It was fever it did for him, and for my brother Robin. Owen died from a mace that split his head apart, and his friend John Pox was hanged for rape. The War of the Ninepenny Kings? Asked Hyle Hunt. So they called it, though I never saw a king, nor earned a penny. It was a war, though. That it was. Maribald defines broken men as more deserving of our pity than simple outlaws. They were men like Maribald, marched off to war only to see all their brothers and friends die in front of them, and their lord still expects them to stand and face the charge of armored knights while wearing broken shoes and wielding scythes and kitchen knives. He runs and runs, or crawls off afterward over the corpses of the slain, or steals away in the black of night, and he finds some place to hide. All thought of home is gone by then, and kings and lords and gods mean less to him than a haunch of spoiled meat that will let him live another day, or a skin of bad wine that might drown his fear for a few hours. The broken man lives from day to day, from meal to meal, more beast than man. Lady Brienne is not wrong. In times like these, the traveler must beware of broken men, and fear them, but he should pity them as well. Basically, George is doing an anti-war monologue from the perspective of a peasant foot soldier rather than a rich lord or a famous knight. George himself conscientiously objected to Nam,
and I didn't think America had any business in Vietnam and so forth.
And spends a good deal of time writing about the horrors of war to accompany the traditional fantasy glory of war.
You know, I think if you're going to write about war and violence, then show the cost. Show how ugly it is. And capture both sides of that. You know, whatever emotional stirring we feel when we see the banner proudly flying in the wind and we hear the bugles charge and the drums are beating and the armies surge forward, but also the aftermath.
But in Brother Ray's speech, he basically says he used to be a soldier who did terrible things on the orders of his superiors. But even if you've got an evil past, you can stop now and spread some goodness.
All I can do with time I've got left is bring a little goodness into the world.
That's all any of us can do, isn't it?
It's never too late to come back.
It's never too late to come back. It's a bit more hopeful than Maribald's Broken Man speech, but has a nice effect, particularly serving Sandor Clegane's arc. But immediately afterward, the Brotherhood without banners murders all of them and steals their food and their steel and the women. Sandor picks up his axe and goes off to get revenge. Then he has to negotiate with Beric and Thoros, who gets to execute how many of them. In the end, violence is answered with more violence, even if the second violence is justice. It's satisfying to watch these criminals get hanged, but this resolution has an extremely cynical answer to Ray's hopeful message.
Never too late to come back.
He says it's never too late to start being good again, and then he gets slaughtered and the Hound gets revenge. In the end, nobody is reformed and tons of people are dead. What if, instead, the Hound spends hours digging graves for all his dead friends, like how Brother Ray was going to dig him a grave until Sandor coughed?
I was going to give you a proper burial and then you coughed. Ha! Nearly shit myself.
It would have lent some sincerity to an otherwise cynical message. Pacifism is never the answer, you must be willing to kill to protect yourself, and it's badass that Sandor got revenge. And not that D&D really cares about George Martin's themes, but A Song of Ice and Fire is pretty consistently anti-revenge. George doesn't glorify any girl boss or boy boss revenge missions. His point is that violence begets violence, and that cycle needs to end. When Brienne meets Sir Hyle Hunt again, who had treated her cruelly in Renly's camp, she doesn't seek revenge on him. And now Tyrion is consumed by revenge, craving a chance to kill his sister Cersei, and it's turned him into a monster. Considering this, I'm even more shocked they didn't include Lady Stoneheart, who's hellbent on getting revenge for the Red Wedding. Clearly George is not trying to paint her in a very positive light, but I could have seen D&D making a badass revenge montage throughout the Riverlands, where the Brotherhood rounds up and hangs a bunch of Freys and Lannisters. Most of the rest of Season 6 is taken up by Arya's Bravo storyline with Isambaro, the High Sparrow and Tommen's inaction in King's Landing, and Bran getting all his Greenseer visions and finally leaving Bloodraven's cave. It's mostly a bunch of inoffensive yet not particularly inspired connective tissue to get us from here to here. This season is punctuated with some especially great moments, like Daenerys rallying her Dothraki army and burning all the slavers in Meereen. And I am a sucker for reunions, so seeing Jon and Sansa together always gets me a little hyped. However, there's nothing here I'd call a great episode of television, and there is one that I simply cannot wrap my head around. Just like Ned's death and the Red Wedding and the Battle of the Bastards, you would think the Tower of Joy is one of those epic holy shit moments from the books
It was a big holy shit for me.
that D&D would want to make a viral moment out of. Obviously, we only see it through Ned's fever dream in Book 1, but that just means D&D could take even more liberties if they wanted to and make the scene all the more epic. Instead, they toned it down, and I have no idea why. First of all, they were 7 facing 3. It's the first line of the scene and they already screwed up. Only 2 Kingsguard, Arthur Dayne and an incorrectly young Geralt Hightower, and 6 Northerners, Ned, Howland, and 4 extras not even credited on IMDb, are present. Maybe they just couldn't get the scene blocking to look right with 10 actors, but I struggle to give D&D the benefit of the doubt.
I don't have anything else, really.
Especially because they go on to castrate the coldest line in the whole book. Hightower says they weren't on the Trident. Oswell Went, who isn't even there in the show, adds, "Woe to the usurper if we had been." Listen to how lame this sounds in comparison.
We weren't there.
Your friend, the usurper, would lie beneath the ground if we had been.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Woe to the usurper if we had been. The scene proceeds to ad-lib a bunch of fake dialogue. Arthur Dayne wishes Ned good fortune in the wars to come for some reason.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come.
Even though this is the end of the war, and the next one isn't until the Greyjoy Rebellion, unless Arthur thought a bunch of lords and the Golden Company might rally around Viserys, or that Ned would fight Robert for Jon, which didn't happen. More likely D&D just like this phrase.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come.
Since they used it for Jon and Mance earlier.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come.
And then their biggest faux pas, Dawn. It's just a normal-ass sword that doesn't glow at all, isn't pale as milk glass, and isn't alive with light. What the hell, I ask you? And why is he dual-wielding? What am I watching? Up in the tower, they remove the part about Howland Reed finding Ned holding Lyanna's dead body. They had found him still holding her body, silent with grief. The little Cranogman, Howland Reed, had taken her hand from his. Ned could recall none of it. The reader is left to assume this means that Howland knows about Jon as well. Clearly George has something planned for Howland, and has even confirmed Howland will appear in the future books. So how come not Bloodraven specifically points out Howland Reed to Bran
The man beside him is Howland Reed, Mira's father.
and says that's Mira's father, only to then remove Howland from the Lyanna scene, and then proceed to never include Howland for the entire rest of the show? In the books, there is a legitimate possibility Howland is the one who reveals this ultimate secret to Jon about his parentage. In the show, it was Bran's vision that nobody understands but immediately trusts anyway. Sam, Jon, Dany, yep, he saw it in a tree vision, good enough for me. I seriously think the only reason Howland Reed was mentioned was to draw a little parallel to the next generation. Howland helped Ned, and now Mira helps Bran. Except Bran treats her like dirt.
You don't need me anymore.
No, I don't.
That's all you've got to say.
You never say thank you!
That's what the money is for!
Again, for no reason other than he's lost all his humanity despite not even being wedded to the trees like Bloodraven was.
Bran!
I'm not really. Not anymore.
And despite the fact that Bran still liked being Bran Stark enough to become king.
Why do you think I came all this way?
Episode 2, Home, is by far the best of Season 6. It has one of my favorite show Jaime moments ever, when he's confronting the High Sparrow in the Great Sept next to Myrcella's corpse.
Well, the gods won't mind. They spill more blood than the rest of us combined.
Again, Jaime's diverged completely from his book character, but I can forgive that when the show's storylines still make sense. It does make sense for Jaime to have this exchange with the High Sparrow. It's nice to see a little backbone in King's Landing since Tommen is so weak, and I like how he uses his own sins almost like a challenge to this holy fool.
What atonement do I deserve?
What atonement do I deserve? It's an awesome line, but I can't say this episode is great because this line reminds me how the writers failed to culminate Jaime's arc.
She's hateful. And so am I.
I know I'm not supposed to hold old episodes accountable for D&D's future mistakes, but I can't help myself here, and the writing was on the wall for Jaime's arc long before this. He comes clean to Brienne in that famous bathroom scene about how, deep down, he just wants to be Jaime, not the Kingslayer.
Jaime. My name's Jaime.
He was trying to be good, and wants to be good. The world just doesn't let him. His sister doesn't let him. His father doesn't let him. In the books, Jaime reconciles this inner struggle, his Mein Kampf if you will, by abandoning Cersei and helping Brienne save Sansa Stark and his own honor. At least he thinks that's what he's doing. He's actually going right into Lady Stoneheart's trap. But in the show, Jaime never reconciles that inner struggle. He really looks up to Brienne, but the ultimate message of his arc is that it's impossible for him to escape his reputation. He stays with Cersei and even goes back to die with her in the end. Funnily enough, Jaime proves Brother Ray's speech wrong about how it's never too late for a broken man to come back.
Never too late to come back.
Episode 2 also features Tormund and the Wildlings hoping the Night's Watch loyalists defeat the mutineers after Jon's death. I thought this was handled pretty well, and basically similar to how it could go down in Winds. Of course, there's a lot more people in the vicinity of Jon's murder in the books, so this whole standoff between the loyalists and mutineers will be over really fast. We also get Euron's introduction in this episode, where he kinslays his brother Balon. It's a well done scene, and I won't judge it for how horrible Euron was adapted after the fact, although he does butcher his famous line from the books.
From Old Town to Karth, when men see my sails, they pray.
The line should be, from Ib to Ashai, when men see my sails, they pray. That's a nitpick, but come on. The main reason I can't stop here and call episode 2 the last great episode of Game of Thrones is Ramsay's kinslaying of Roose. My problems with the adaptation of Roose Bolton are enough to fill a whole video on its own, but I particularly hate his death. The show wants to focus on Ramsay Bolton as the singular villain for Jon and Sansa to defeat. D&D consistently do this, both on the good guys team and the bad guys. The oversimplifying of all the politics of everything because we're too stupid to keep track of more than one arch-nemesis. The books do this far better. There's a whole pro-Bolton faction in the north, and there's a mystery for the readers to solve regarding which lords are earnestly for the Boltons, and which are conspiring behind Roos's back in favor of a Stark restoration. Ramsay isn't a decision maker, he's the rabid hound you unleash on the enemy. So as soon as Roose died, it became so clear that the good guys were about to win, and all it would take is a single battle where Jon can outwit or outfight Ramsay. Roose is more cunning. He settles in for a siege while Stannis is beset by a blizzard, knowing he lacks the strength to take Winterfell by storm. Thanks to growing dissent between his own lords Manderly and Frey, Roose is about to send out an army to take care of Stannis, with Ramsay leading the charge. This opens the door for way more interesting solutions than the Battle of the Bastards. Stannis can lose, for example, and trudge back to the Wall and burn Shireen. Stannis can win by the Night Lamp theory, forcing Ramsay's army to fall into the ice. From there, he can infiltrate Winterfell and defeat Roose by hiding in the Manderly's and Frey's regalia. Or he can try to besiege Winterfell, realize he lacks the resources, and trudge back to the Wall and burn Shireen. He could take Winterfell, scatter Ramsay's army back to the Dreadfort, and get abandoned by all his northern lords when they realize Arya isn't even there to be saved. There's even the possibility for Stannis to defeat Ramsay initially, and for a resurrected Jon Snow to lead his army of wildlings against Ramsay and the Dreadfort in a Battle of the Bastards. The show just simplified the hell out of it by having Ramsay murder Roose, and it sort of takes the magic out of Game of Thrones for me. In a world where anything can happen, now it's super obvious what's going to happen. I'm not really sure if this is a hot take or not, but I'm way more critical of Season 5 than Season 6. An analogy I like to use is the Skate video game franchise. Initially, they were gritty, realistic, and portrayed actual skateboarding culture. Initially, Game of Thrones portrayed actual storylines from the books and realistic outcomes for players of the game. Then, in Skate 3, and especially the new Not Skate 4, the game has become sort of Fortnite-ified. Everything is more arcadey and unrealistic. Season 5 is where Game of Thrones took that turn into cheesy, oversimplified live-action YA novel. The best culprit is Sansa's marriage to Ramsay. This was the worst place to take Sansa's character, and the writers only did it for the sake of trimming down the narrative and putting its plotlines into big bold letters. For this plot to work, it demands the complete character assassination of one of its core players, Peter Baelish. George Martin has said that his Littlefinger would never sell Sansa to the Boltons. Why would he? He's the acting Lord Paramount of the Vale, who's got a perverted crush on his pseudo-daughter, the actual daughter of the recently deceased unrequited love of his life. Littlefinger is scheming for more, always more, trying to climb higher on the ladder of chaos.
Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder.
Remember that fan favorite line from Season 3? It now doesn't apply to the man who said it. By marrying Sansa off to Ramsay, Littlefinger ostensibly gains control over Winterfell. If Sansa can manipulate her new husband, she becomes the central power of the North, and Littlefinger can take out Ramsay and Roose in private after they deal with Stannis. But even if Stannis wins, he'd keep Sansa alive as his Stark in Winterfell to get the Northern Lords on his side. But the logic is insanely flawed.
I'm a bit confused.
First of all, Littlefinger's whole theory in life is that knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
Why would he give Sansa to a groom whose sadism he knows nothing about? Or, if we're meant to believe Littlefinger took Cersei's lesson in this scene, and now he believes that power is power,
Power is power.
why would he give Sansa to another house when he could have waited out the Stannis versus Bolton conflict and swooped in afterwards? Second of all, if Stannis had won against Ramsay, sure he'd keep Sansa as the Lady of Winterfell, but why on earth would he spare Littlefinger? The guy who's notoriously obsessed with justice to the point of chopping off his own savior's fingers because he broke the king's laws. There's no scenario in which Stannis spares the guy who's worked for the Lannisters all these years and betrayed Ned Stark to secure Joffrey's reign. This means that half of the two potential outcomes, either Stannis wins or the Boltons win, results in Littlefinger dying. So Season 5 is where logic, in the form of the show's most logical character, dies out. Season 5 also contains the Sand Snake storyline and Jaime and Bronn's adventure in Dorne. Plenty of fun has already been poked about how terrible these episodes are, so I won't spend a bunch of time here. I do need to at least quickly substantiate my claim though. George spent a lot of time setting up the political landscape of Dorne. Basically, Doran Martell is working on House Lannister's downfall. The Sand Snakes all want to get vengeance for their father Oberyn's death, and Princess Arianne is concerned that her father means to supplant her with her younger brother. So she hatches this scheme to crown Myrcella the queen and use this as a casus belli to ignite war with King Tommen, using the excuse of the Dornish succession law that the eldest child inherits no matter their gender. If Arianne's plan works out, Dorne will rally around her and she'll definitely succeed her father. That's a lot. I can appreciate that some of this might need to be truncated for a TV adaptation, but I can't appreciate how they erased Arianne completely and simplified the Sand Snakes into a tomboy who only cares about fighting and a couple of succubi who, for no real reason other than getting some boobs on screen, mess with Bronn in his cell. And instead of Jaime's book storyline, in which he deserts Cersei, he is now secretly infiltrating Dorne on her behalf with one singular guy for backup and one hand that's made out of metal. He goofs his way into some horses and a Dornish disguise, and miraculously, despite having never stepped foot in Dorne and having no clue where the Water Gardens actually are or how heavily guarded it should really be, stumbles across Myrcella and Trystane during an intimate moment for the sake of convenience and levity. The Sand Snakes also claim to be acting out of justice for Oberyn, but they murder the innocent Myrcella despite Oberyn's claim that Dorne does not hurt little girls.
You don't hurt little girls in Dorne. You don't hurt little girls in Dorne. You don't hurt little girls in Dorne.
Clearly, the writers just wanted to quickly kill Myrcella, and then Trystane and Doran, and never include Arianne and Quentyn, so the Dornish could have a minimal footprint on the overall structure of the show. It's just completely opposite of George's storyline in the books, where Arianne is literally about to meet with King Aegon at Storm's End, which she just captured, two characters who were erased entirely from the show. Remember, I don't care if D&D want to change George's plots, but they have to be changes for the betterment of the show. The allegations about me are true. I enjoy Harbhowm. It's a masterpiece of the television artistic medium, and I get the tinglies when Longclaw shatters this White Walker's icicle sword. Harbhowm is the delicious fudge drizzle over my shit sundae of a season 5. In the midst of Sansa's needless sexual trauma, and the disgracefully unceremonious end of Sir Barristan Selmy, the just lazy crash out of Stannis Baratheon,
Go on, do your duty,
and the mummer's farce of a Dorne plot, there is one bright light that shines eternal, a light beckoning me forward. The light is named Harbhowm. I believe Season 5, Episode 8 is the last truly great episode of Game of Thrones, strictly from a television Terry standpoint. I am also a book-reading Barry, so I'll discuss the real last great episode later on. That's right, this video isn't even particularly close to being over yet. Harbhowm is a rare instance of D&D making their own plot up and it actually working for the show. In the books, the Harbhowm conflict is basically happening in the background. Thousands of free folk flee there after Stannis beats Mance Rayder, so Jon Snow sends Cotter Pike with 11 ships to bring the wildlings from Harbhowm south of the Wall, just like how he's letting all the other free folk who follow Tormund south of the Wall. But Cotter Pike only makes it there with 6 ships. The seas are wild. Wildlings attack one of the ships, and there are dead things in the woods and the water. Jon must send help over land because the water is racked with storms and dead things. In Jon's final chapter, he plans to lead a rescue mission himself, just like in the TV show, but then he receives Ramsay's pink letter and diverts his attention to saving Arya, and obviously he then gets goofed on by the mutineers. Tormund might still lead this rescue mission early and wins, but I could also see him staying at Castle Black and dealing with Jon's death and getting justice from the mutineers. There's a chance Harbhowm just doesn't happen in the books, unless we see it from Davos Seaworth's POV after he fetches Rickon from Skagos. He's a good guy, that Onion Knight, so I could see him, or even Little Rickon, wanting to save the wildlings from whatever dead things are lurking. Right from the very first shot, I'm impressed how Game of Thrones actually found a filming location, Magara Quarry in Northern Ireland, to make a scene that looks just like Harbhowm is described in the books, a sheltered bay beneath a huge cliff overlooking the shivering sea. I find it a little hard to believe that all the thousands of wildlings wear the exact same outfits, but that's only a nitpick. When Tormund and Jon meet Rattleshirt, I am reminded of how D&D omitted the switcheroo at Mance Rayder's death party, and that Mance is really just deceased in the show. But I get past that when Tormund beats Rattleshirt over the head with a club. Inside the hut, Jon gives his little speech, and I think it's nicely written. Particularly the line about, "The long night is coming, and the dead come with it. No clan can stop them. The free folk can't stop them. The Night's Watch can't stop them, and all the Southern Kings can't stop them. Only together." I'm not going to punish Hardhome for the long night only lasting literally one night. If the payoff in Season 8 was done properly, this scene would be fantastic setup. Mostly, my love for this episode is vibes-based. The ratcheting of tension as Jon hurries to get all the wildling women and children onto the boats, accompanied by the ominous deep strings. The gust of cold wind and frost that we know foretells the other's arrival, but Jon doesn't. This great jump scare, and the death of Laboda of Then. I love the way all the sound goes blurry when Jon fights the White Walker. We are just as disoriented as he is, until that climactic moment that their swords clash and ring out and Longclaw doesn't break. It's one of the most recognizable sound bites of the whole series. And I love the stare down between Jon Snow and the Night King, each of them seeing his enemy for the first time. It would be so neat if this went somewhere interesting, but again, that's not Hardhome's fault. Look, I know this episode isn't perfect. They invented this Then named Laboda when they could have just used Sigorn, the son of Styr, who Jon killed in Watchers on the Wall. In the books, before all this Hardhome business, Jon actually arranges a marriage between Sigorn and Alice Karstark, an unlikely match that's actually sort of cute, and displays Jon's growth in political cunning, as well as laying the groundwork for his eventual betrayal of his vows. Here he skirts the line of Night's Watch interfering with lords and ladies by helping Alice Karstark, who was supposed to be Arya, according to Melisandre's vision. Now he fully steps over the line and plans to march south and fight Ramsay. This show is missing the Sigorn and Alice subplot, and I think that's a detriment. Also, the beginning of this episode is really nothing to write home about. Tyrion meets Daenerys, which is pretty good.
I am the greatest Lannister killer of our time.
But then we see Jorah's grayscale, and I begin lamenting the removal of Jon Connington and Aegon all over again. We get Cat of the Canals content, some Cersei in her cell, some cute Sam and Gilly stuff. I'm once again irked by seeing Sansa in Winterfell. This interaction with Theon does nothing for me. They should have just done the Jane Poole plot. I'm gonna stop talking about Hardhome now, before I accidentally convince myself it was actually Cheeks. For what it's worth, I do think Watchers on the Wall is better than Hardhome, but my purpose here is to find the last great episode of Thrones. And a contender for the worst, in my scholarly opinion, immediately succeeds Watchers on the Wall. Season 4's finale was the rusty tetanus nail in the waterlogged coffin of any semblance of book accuracy in Game of Thrones. It begins with a euphoric high, the triumphant arrival of the king who cared. Sure, they cut Val, one of my favorite characters, but look at the badass way Davos is holding a sword.
Huh? Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
What's this smuggler doing? I love it. I even think the bells references this shot. I don't know, maybe. Jon's private funeral for Ygritte, the mad dash to get Bran inside Bloodraven's cave, why do I hate it so much? To a lesser degree, it's because of the Hound and Brienne's fight over who gets to keep Arya. Not that the scene itself is terrible, but the scene from the books it's replacing is an absolutely tragic loss. So far in the books, Brienne hasn't found Arya or Sansa yet, but she's looking for them all over the Riverlands. When she stops by the inn at the crossroads, Brienne must defend the orphan children from the brave companions' outlaws. 7, Brienne thought again, despairing. She had no chance against 7, she knew. No chance and no choice. Heroically, and with Gendry's help, Brienne beats the outlaws and saves the children. One of them, Rorge, is wearing the Hound's helm, which he found on his way to sack salt pans. So the Brienne-Hound duel in this episode is sort of an homage to that moment from the book, except we're erasing Brienne's selfless heroism for the sake of another epic rival moment. The scene where Arya leaves Sandor without granting him mercy still happens in the books due to his wounds from fighting Polliver's men. So there is really no plot excuse for inserting this fight other than putting Brienne and Arya in a scene together and making the viewer wonder if Arya would go with her. But to a much worse degree, it's the escape of Tyrion from King's Landing and the Tysha omission that do it for me. This scene is where Game of Thrones died and went to generic Hollywood hell. That's a bit harsh. More effort was put into Game of Thrones than the vast majority of movies and shows produced by big studios. I'll rewatch Season 8 before I ever see Star Wars Kenobi: A Star Wars Story, or Squid Game 3, More Squid Games. I'm hardly the first person on the internet to claim that removing Jaime's confession about Tysha as he helps Tyrion escape was one of the single worst mistakes David and Dan made in their adaptation. One that effectively ruined Tyrion's arc for the rest of the series and severely hurt Jaime's as well. So I'll just make my point succinctly and move on. Me when I lie? If you need your memory jogged, Tysha was the girl who Tyrion married when he was 13 and she was 14. He believed that Tysha was a poor crofter's daughter who really fell in love with him for realsies. But after a fortnight of teenage marital bliss, Tywin found out and forced Jaime to tell Tyrion that Tysha was only a whore he had paid to take Tyrion's virginity. She didn't actually love him. Tywin then had Tysha raped by dozens of his guards, and he forced Tyrion to go last. Safe to say this was a real trauma-building moment for a 13-year-old boy. But when Jaime frees Tyrion from his cell, he thinks they might never see each other again, so he makes a confession. She was no whore. I never bought her for you. That was a lie that father commanded me to tell. Tysha was what she seemed to be, a crofter's daughter, chance met on the road. This revelation basically flips a switch in Tyrion's brain. He was never a particularly benevolent person, but now he was filled with bitterness and spite and venom. He hits his brother and says, "Oh, you've earned more than that, Jaime. You and my sweet sister and our loving father, yes. I can't begin to tell you what you've earned. But you will have it, that I swear to you. A Lannister always pays his debts." He's so full of hatred that he tells Jaime how Cersei's been boning their cousin Lancel and Osmond Kettleblack, and probably Moonboy for all I know. "And I am the monster they all say I am. Yes, I killed your vile son." He lies about killing Joffrey just to hurt Jaime, and then goes and finds Tywin on the shitter.
Tyrion.
A TV series that was actually interested in adapting the original characters would have to include this scene. It's the impetus for Tyrion's turn to the dark side. It's how he goes from trying his best to be a good hand of the king and help House Lannister, to becoming hellbent on Cersei's downfall, to raping a girl in a brothel, and manipulating Aegon to invade Westeros just for kicks. But from this point on in the series, the writers were committed to whitewashing Tyrion and keeping him basically a hero we can still root for.
I don't have anything else, really. Sorry.
In George Martin's own words, Tyrion is a villain. He becomes so stagnated and dumbed down in the later seasons because the arc he should be going through was cut entirely.
Because I have balls, and you don't.
He doesn't really have any character motivations anymore. He is perpetually the I drink and I know things guy from here on out. In the books, Tyrion connives his way out of slavery and into the Second Sons. He'll meet Daenerys and her dragons, Victarion and Marwyn the Mage, Barristan Selmy and Daario and Missandei. He lusts for revenge against his siblings and wants to bring fire and sword to Westeros. How compelling would it be to find Tyrion in this black-pilled state of mind, only to become somewhat white-pilled by Daenerys? She can uplift him from his abyss, show him how to use power for good, convince him that not every king and queen and lord is a spiteful, hateful, or idiotic adversary. Not that Tyrion will necessarily be redeemed. That would be hard at this point. But he'll simply go on an upwards trajectory that'll be exciting to see unfold. But this theory isn't even possible for the show. Tyrion meets Daenerys basically the same as he's always been, if a little more of an alcoholic. There's no abyss for her to lift him out of, and he's immediately on board with her anti-slavery crusade, wants to help her become Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, and even falls in love with her.
I love her too, not as successfully as you.
He's just one note, when he used to be complex.
Tyrion is smart, but I guess not that smart.
Let me just cut straight to Season 3. The rest of Season 4 is all fine. Adaptationally, I mean. It's great TV. I also can't forgive D&D for replacing Edric Storm with Gendry, so that means a good chunk of Season 3 can't be the real last great episode either. Kissed by Fire is amazing. I love how the Iron Price plays over Robb's execution of Rickard Karstark. The Hound's trial by combat is well done, Ygritte and Jon have cave sex, and of course, Jaime's bath monologue is one of the finer scenes of the entire series. But I heartily dislike Littlefinger offering to straight up whisk Sansa away from King's Landing and bring her home. It makes Sansa way too dumb and naive in the show, especially since her prospective marriage is to the beautiful Sir Loras Tyrell instead of the crippled Willis Tyrell. In the book, Sansa clings on to the hope of marrying Willis because it's all she has. In the show, Sansa has better options, and they fall through due to her own refusal to go with Littlefinger and instead trying to secure herself a hot husband. And now his watch is ended is quite good, and although I do enjoy the show-only character Locke, I think Jaime's capturing was done better in the book with Vargo Hoat and the Brave Companions. Also, Varys and Olenna's conversation leaves a sour taste in my mouth. Varys warns Olenna that Littlefinger plans to leave the city with Sansa Stark, and perhaps marry her and take the north for himself. Varys doesn't want Littlefinger to succeed, but his reasoning irks me.
Littlefinger is one of the most dangerous men in Westeros, but he would see this country burn if he could be king of the Ashes.
Varys isn't supposed to be this altruistic, seeking only the right ruler for the Iron Throne, stopping a man like Littlefinger from amassing too much power. His goal should be paving the way for Aegon Targaryen. You can see how the removal of Aegon affects Varys' character even in Season 3. Walk of Punishment opens with the good goof, Edmure being unable to light Hoster Tully's funeral boat. Whereas it's played for comedy in the show, it's actually kind of sad and tense in the book. Edmure struggling so hard to cope with his father's death and his own rise to Lord of Riverrun, that he's so tight he can't hit the boat. But for turning Edmure into damned comedic relief, and for cutting his absolutely perfect line about why he defeated Tywin Lannister at the Red Fork, I can't love this episode. Hundreds of small folk had been admitted to the castle, and allowed to erect crude shelters against the walls. Their children were everywhere underfoot, and the yard teemed with their cows, sheep, and chickens. Who are all these folk? My people, Edmure answered. They were afraid. That's why Edmure threw Tywin back across the river. For his people. From a utilitarian viewpoint, a poor decision. But from a humanistic viewpoint, Edmure's a hero. Yes, even in Season 3, the good old days, TM, D&D were dumbing down complexities for the sake of characters only having one defining trait. Edmure's a buffoon, and that's really it. Darkwing's Dark Words removes the scene where Robb tells Catelyn he's naming Jon Snow his heir. At least, it would probably go in this scene. In the book, their conversation happens closer to the Red Wedding. I really like that detail from the book, and I'm not really sure why the show removed it. But the main reason I can't love this episode is the conversation between Talissa, who shouldn't exist, and Catelyn Stark. Despite Michelle Fairley's most well-acted monologue in the entire series, her last line just makes no sense to me.
And everything that's happened since then, all this horror that's come to my family, it's all because I couldn't love a motherless child.
D&D love to write lines that sound super hard, but actually don't mean anything substantive.
A girl is Arya Stark of Winterfell, and I'm going home.
All the horror that's come to House Stark, Bran's fall, Ned's death, the ruin of Winterfell, the perilous situations of Sansa and Arya, none of this has anything to do with Cat not being able to love Jon. It happened because the Lannisters suck and Ned kind of fumbled the bag in King's Landing. Unless Catelyn is saying this is the god's way of punishing her for not loving Jon, which is a crazy thing to believe. All of this, basically the entire main plot of the show, Cat believes is happening because the gods are punishing her? Now that's just arrogant. I wish they just kept the scene where Catelyn warns Robb about legitimizing Jon. It makes way more sense that Cat would be wary of Jon's power, and it makes her come across way more politically intelligent, rather than the ultimately dutiful, I just love my dead husband and kids so much version of Cat from the show. Valar Dohaeris has Robb taking Harrenhal with Roose Bolton, and erases Robb's campaign in the West. This is terrible because that's how Robb met Jane Westerling. In the show, he just has this meet-cute with a noble-born Volantene battlefield nurse. You know, as you do. And by the way, is this the only outfit Talissa owns? Give me Jane, or give me something for the pain and let me whatever. Jane, Jane, it rhymes with pain, you know? Talissa, Talissa, it rhymes with Shalissa.
Nah, they usually tell me I look like Shalissa.
Robb should have married her, it'd make just as much sense. Valar Morghulis is the finale of Season 2, and it's balls. Now, that's not true, but I don't love it. And remember, I'm trying to find the last episode of Game of Thrones that's perfectly adapted from the books. I enjoy all of this pretty much, but it's not perfect. Valar Morghulis is the episode where Robb marries Talissa. He meets Talissa in episode 4, Garden of Bones, so we can safely remove all of these from consideration. That choice is made easier for me by the butchery of Daenerys' Qarth storyline. Right from the beginning, in episode 4, they make Dany's arrival to Qarth a hostile demand for entrance. This is exactly the opposite of how it goes in the books, and it proves how D&D had zero interest in portraying George's version of Daenerys. Show enjoyers like to defend Dany's turn to madness in Season 8 by pointing all the way back here in Season 2, as Dany threatens to lay waste to Qarth once her dragons are fully grown if they don't let her in. And yeah, I can't really blame them. If they haven't read the books, they don't know who Dany truly is. Her dragons, and she herself as the last Targaryen, are such a marvel that 3 emissaries from Qarth ride out to greet her and escort her inside as an honored guest. But I guess that's not as exciting as a malnourished dying girl screaming to be let into the city. And on a more whimsical note, D&D consistently remove or tone down the magic-y dream stuff in the show, and I consistently hate it. They especially half-assed the House of the Undying. In the books, Dany sees a bunch of cool shit, a foreshadowing of the Red Wedding, the house with the red door, her father telling them to burn King's Landing, her brother Rhaegar saying that Aegon is the prince that was promised, and there must be 3 heads of the dragon, a blue flower growing in a wall of ice to represent Jon Snow, etc. Oh, and all of these visions are induced by Shade of the Evening, a super cool psychedelic elixir, the removal of which also harms Euron's character in the show.
A finger in the bum.
If you haven't read this section of the books, it's Daenerys' 4th chapter in A Clash of Kings. It's amazing, seriously.
It is brilliant American literature, and I don't care what anybody, it should be taught in schools.
In the show, Dany sees Khal Drogo for some reason, which can only mean that despite being sold to him as a slave, and continually maritally raped by him, she loves him still and misses him. She sees the Iron Throne Room filled with snow or ash, which I suppose means that D&D were super sure where they wanted Dany's character to go. It's just lame, man. And don't even get me started on the removal of Dany's dragonry. What is dead may never die is pretty great. I actually like D&D's version of Jon and Craster, where we can actually see Jon seeing the other take Craster's son. In the book, Gilly just tells Jon about Craster's boys, and Lord Commander Mormont admits to Jon that all the higher-ups of the Night's Watch know about these offerings to the wood. Bran wargs Summer, which is cool. Brienne's fight with Loras at the melee of Bitterbridge is nicely done. And this is the episode where Hand of the King Tyrion does his little game with Pycelle, Littlefinger, and Varys, telling each of them a different tale about who Myrcella is going to marry, and learning that Pycelle spilled the beans. This was in the book, so we can't give the writers credit here for an original idea, but after all, they're adapters, and they did an excellent job adapting this scene. Even the editing I love, how it transitions seamlessly between the 3 small council members. Freaky Marjorie offers to have a threesome with her own brother if that's what Renly needs to ejaculate his royal semen inside of her uterus. And this was a nice addition by D&D, a rare example of their horniness actually adding something of value to the show. The viewer learns just how far Marjorie is willing to go to ensure Renly's reign and her family's status as royal consort. I love Cersei's reaction to hearing about Myrcella's betrothal. It's a bit shorter than the book version, but still a very well adapted scene. Later, Varys gives his "power resides where men believe it resides" speech.
It's a trick, a shadow on the wall.
And we can be forgiven for thinking this might mean Thrones was going to adapt his character properly and not excise the key motivator behind all of Varys' actions. D&D invent this great backstory for Yoren about seeing his brother get murdered in front of his eyes.
I can't picture my brother's face anymore, but Willem, oh, he was a nice-looking boy.
He tells Arya about being consumed by vengeance and using the killer's name as a prayer, about murdering Willem and then taking the black. It does glorify vengeance, which is not Martin's overall message, but it's a very appropriate thing for Arya to hear at this point in her character arc. It's only season 2, so she should have this romanticized idea of vengeance that slowly becomes torn down as the series progresses. And to an extent, they did fulfill that arc, with Sandor telling Arya to forget about vengeance with Cersei, thus saving her from the collapsing Red Keep. You know what? I have convinced myself. Season 2, Episode 3, What is Dead May Never Die, is the last perfect episode of Game of Thrones. It's not my favorite or the most epic, and there are better ones that come before it, but in terms of taking what George wrote and adapting it for television, this is really the last time D&D succeed at such a high level. They were really in their bag here. That's just my opinion, of course. Let me know down in the comments what you think is the last great episode of Thrones just from a TV standpoint, and the last great episode in terms of adapting George's work. If you've made it this far, thank you. I like doing these long-form yap videos, and I'll probably do them more often, even if it means I can't upload as much. If you feel like supporting me further, my Patreon is linked in the description. Thanks for watching.